And we're on to the last part of Front Row. Thank you for staying with us. I'm seeing a lot of feedback and comments from you. Let's take a look at a number before we go back to our panelists for their final remarks. Robert Kiplagat on Twitter says, in the old constitution, there was discipline in the civil service. It was lean. A centrally managed civil service can deliver on devolution. Is BBI going to address this, he asks. Dongo Wainaina says, the Constitution of Kenya 2010 envisions that accomplishment of the system of devolved government will focus on enfranchisement, equity and prudent use of public resources, enhanced local service delivery and equitable development across the country. Implement the Constitution. And Kalala Steve says, the panelists are very collected and on point. Healthy discussion there. Thank you. Okello Talk says, Akisa Wandera, great discussion there. What is better way to reform if the Constitution would not be amended purposefully to fix? I believe constitutional amendment is a strategic act to fix mischief and add value. A value amendment should not be misunderstood to mean abrogation. Federico Kango says, Wanjiro's argument on the World Development Fund is far-fetched. Wanjiro, I hope you're paying attention to this. You'll respond. She forgets that for reasonable access of services in all parts of the Republic, adopting the word as a primary unit of accelerated development is a way to go. This qualifies the objects of devolution. We'll have you respond to that. And we also have a Fantas Mutiga who says, devolution has led to quite some developments in counties, especially on roads, infrastructure, in schools and hospitals. The challenge is health, where medics are going for months without pay. And let's take a look at a final one before we proceed. One here says, let's take a look at a final one. Okay, I think that's it. Obunga Apamo says, the clause on allocation of resources makes sense until we meet a president who's not willing to strengthen devolution. This amendment should be clear on how will this make the national government prioritize education. Some comments, I can't possibly read all of them. I want us to take the closing remarks. Another round for our panelists. I'll start with you, Prof. There's been a question here on centralizing the civil service. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, and going forward, given that we are expecting county assemblies to debate on this particular document another month perhaps, what do we expect to see?
Civil service, public service, civil service, generally?
Yes, yes. Is there a possibility of...
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that's one of the main concerns of BBI, because, and it is three-pronged. It is three-pronged. One is the question of merit, and diversity. And those two are key, because in some cases you may get people who have the relevant, and this is about qualifications, appropriate qualifications, meaning that there must be merit and there must be diversity. Meaning that when you want to recruit and you retain people in the civil service, you must look for those who have academic and professional qualifications. You give them the appropriate job description, and then you evaluate their performance on the basis of national qualification framework, etc., among others. Number two, and diversity here also means that in some cases, one may not have an academic point, may miss 1 point or something, but because of historical injustices which BBI recognizes, the fact that where the region they come from, the tribe they come from, the gender they come from, the idea of youth, then you take into account diversity. So merit and diversity are part of qualification, and they are very important. Number two is basically rationalize and harmonize pay rationalize and harmonize pay or remuneration in the entire public service, whether it's in the among MPs, whether that's public service, not just civil service. But let me focus on civil service. You'll recognize that in some civil servants have much higher pay by virtue of the office they hold, not necessarily by virtue of their qualifications or the job description. And this is what is now necessary to harmonize, rationalize and harmonize. And Bomas had talked about it, but it was missed in Naivasha. The other Naivasha that gave us 2010, it missed that idea of rationalize. And that's why you will see that some people in the public service or in the civil service negotiate much higher pay than others. Lastly, of course, there is the question of ensuring much greater performance of the public service and evaluating their performance on a regular basis.
Okay.
The performance contracting, among others, which I think could be done much better through the relevant constitutional background. In other words, if you don't perform, there are sanctions under the BBI purpose, as well as legislative and policy reforms. Thanks.
Fair enough. My apologies. We don't have too much time, and I'd like to have everyone give their closing remarks. Thank you, Prof. Wanjiru, Fredo Kango had said that your arguments talked about your arguments on the Ward Development Fund. So then let's just stick to this. Your response, and then what then do we expect to see at the county assemblies? What good is it for Kenyans?
I think, thanks, Akisa. One is there's a need to make a distinction between the report and the Constitution Amendment Bill, because several of the issues that are really good are contained in the report are not in the Constitutional Amendment Bill, and this conversation then becomes very confusing, and so county assembly members and members of the public will be voting or agreeing with a bill that does not contain the provisions it imagines it does. So that's the first thing. There's a huge confusion even in this conversation. The second thing is, just before I get to the issue of the Ward Development Fund, is to say one critical thing that is missing in the Constitution Amendment Bill is the Health Commission. And you know, we talked about the issues that ail devolution, and we must accept we have a huge problem in the health sector. Our health sector has virtually stalled, and there's been a demand by the health professionals for a health commission. This is put in the policy, but it's not put in the bill. And the proposal then that we make is that there should be a commission, but it should be an intergovernmental commission, not a national commission, so that we can satisfy the needs of the health profession and ensure that we deal with that problem. The second thing before I get to the Ward Development Fund, and they're linked, the question we must ask ourselves is, does the Constitution Amendment Bill give citizens more say? We must remember devolution of power is not supposed to devolve from national government to the county governor level. It's supposed to devolve to the citizens, and that's the thinking behind the Ward Development Fund. But how do you get the power of the citizen? One, recall. The power of recall should be direct to the citizen and shouldn't be subject to a legislative qualification. That is not contained. The issue of citizen petitions should have the force, such as even constitutional popular petitions, should actually be citizen-led processes and not subject to legislative approval as they are now. So no, the Constitution Amendment Bill does not give citizens power. Fair enough. The last point on the Ward Development Fund. The Ward Development Fund, my argument is we need to push for the decentralization of more resources to the county. I support entirely having a 5% that goes to maybe Community Development Fund. But my argument against the Ward Development Fund is that it's linked to the county assembly members.
Fair.
Instead of being linked to community development and citizen engagement. Thank you.
All right. Kevin, from County Governance Watch then, in 2 or 3 minutes, I'd really like to wind up, and even as you give us your closing remarks, how then do we enhance the public to participate in these processes in the counties? Because this is all about them.
As is espoused in our Constitution, both the principles and the objects of devolution There's a reason why Kenyans asked for a devolved system of governance. And so even as we seek to move through what His Excellency the President calls the First Amendment of our Constitution, it is very paramount for us to look at what kind of journey have we walked, what are these gaps, challenges, what are the successes, what are the gains that we have been able to pick up, and challenges, and of course including how we can be able to respond to them. And so the BBI process gives us that opportunity to be able to respond to and find ways of navigating through the challenges that we are facing. And I think for me, moving forward, Akisa, we must ensure that citizens understand this process. The kind of propaganda that we have seen and we continue to see, especially from the political class, is not healthy for this country, is not good for a very content-heavy report like the BBI report, because the BBI report gives us, as the professor says, the constitutional issues, the legislative issues, the policy issues, including at the back of it are annexed draft policies for which are supposed to be looked at.
All right.
So we must emphasize issues of civic education, let organizations like TISA, County Governance Watch, and several others up to the village level be empowered and resourced to be able to ensure that citizens are coming together and engaging and talking, right from young people, women, persons with disabilities, the professional classes. The second issue is, of course, I agree with a lawyer who said, let's implement the Constitution. These are a call that Kenyans have continued to, is a rallying call that Kenyans have continued to bring up. Right. I think we must ensure that we look at the Constitution through its First Amendment and implement the issues that we have continued to talk about. Last but not least, I think citizens, we must continue to organize ourselves. We can't afford to leave this country to the kind of politicians that we are seeing. If we fail to organize ourselves, as the Swahili say, kutojipanga ni kupangwa. Let's jipanga ourselves and just ensure that we pick the low-lying fruits from recommendations of the BBI report and hit the road and make good use of them. Thank you.
Kabara, you also talked about citizen engagement, but I'd like to pick your mind on then, as we move forward, what are some of the things that would be very useful for devolution and not part of this BBI document, but are things we can consider even as we move forward, as you give us your closing remarks?
I think the first one, which comes from the objective. I don't think we did enough from the objective, the BBI objective on devolution. I think we need to do more thinking on economic development. What does economic development mean? What does local economic development mean? Because I'm not in the policy proposals, in the legislative proposals, in the administrative proposals, I'm not seeing enough on that. And the reason why I say that is because we need to think about the only way you can boost, as a county, your own source revenue is by boosting the economy. You can see it even at the national level. The reason why tax collections are suffering is because the economy is suffering. So it's the same, I think it's the same thinking that needs to go back. There were a lot of policies that were proposed in the BBI document, but some of them are a bit, can I call them, flowery. For example, on the productivity, I saw a policy on machinery. What does that mean? Or another policy on justice. What is a policy on justice? Right? Or a policy on citizen education. We need to tease this out a bit more. So for me, I think there are two things. As citizens, let citizens understand that devolution, as with the other 8 topics, you have constitutional proposals, which are the ones going to the county assemblies. You have policy proposals. You have legislative proposals, which we've not talked about. For example, under the County Government Act, the idea of giving the deputy governor a ministerial portfolio. That's one of the proposals in the to change the County Government Act. We haven't talked about it. And then, of course, there are the administrative proposals, right? The things about transferring functions from national government to county governments, which is one of the main recommendations made by the Commission on Revenue Allocation.
All right.
So for me, it's about getting a better package in front of the citizens in a way that they understand. So that even when they're thinking about these constitutional amendments, they're also understanding that there are other things that also need to be implemented as part of this BBI improvement, so to speak.
Right.
That's where I would end it.
Way to end it. Key questions there you raise. I hope we'll all be thinking about that even as we continue to have this conversation around the BBI. The IEBC has already given a clean bill of health to the 1.14 signatures. This heads to the county assembly, so we'll keep our eyes on that particular process. But you are urged to read this document for yourself to make a very conclusive decision, personal decision, on whether you will be voting for it or not and whether it serves your interests or not. Thank you for joining us here on the front row. Our guest tonight, Professor Ben Sihanya, a constitutional lawyer, Wanjiro Gekonyo, National Coordinator, the Institute for Social Accountability, TISA, Kevin Osido, Executive Director, County Governance Watch, and Dennis Kabara, Public Finance and Management Consultant. Gentlemen and lady, thank you for joining us on the show. I am Akisa Wandera. I'll see you next time on the front row.